My name is Marc J. Victor. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Arizona with my own law firm in Chandler, Arizona. I've been practicing criminal law since 1994, and I'm a state bar certified specialist in criminal law. I can always be reached through my website at attorneyforfreedom.com. And today we're here to talk a little bit about DUI. First piece of advice on DUI is don't get one. Don't drink and drive. That's really a good way to avoid a DUI in the first place. Obviously, if you're going to drink and you're going to be out in town, do the smart thing. Either get a taxi home or appoint a friend to be a designated driver. So in the event that you do get a DUI, there are some smart things that you could keep in mind to sort of avoid prosecution for a DUI. First thing is don't be a free pullover for the police. Obviously, if you're driving down the road with headlights out or tail lights out or expired tags or something of that variety, you're just a billboard to a police officer that says, go ahead and pull me over. So check your car, make sure that your car is safe and your car is not a free billboard saying pull me over. Also, don't speed, make sure you're driving within a lane, make sure your turns are not wide turns. Easy traffic violations, those are easy for police officers to pull you over as well. If indeed you get pulled over, you can be sure that the officer will ask you for a proof of registration, license, and insurance. You should have those things ready to go. At my law firm, we offer a handy document holder so you can put the registration and proof of insurance in there safely, securely in your glove box. Because if you're fumbling around during the traffic stop, the officer will surely note that and use that in his or her police report against you. If the officer says step out of the vehicle, you have to step out of the vehicle. You got to pull over, you got to provide license, registration, proof of insurance, and you have to step out of the vehicle. That also goes for all passengers as well. So if you're a passenger in the front seat or the back seat and the officer says step out of the vehicle, you have no option. You have to step out of the vehicle. In addition to that, the officer can detain you and make sure that you don't walk away. By the way, you should make sure to say, officer, am I free to leave, yes or no? That sometimes is a good way to make sure whether or not you are free to leave, because sometimes there is a dispute on that point. You should always, if you find yourself speaking with a police officer, ensure whether or not you're free to leave. If the officer says you're free to leave, here's a good tip: leave. Be safe. There is nothing to be gained from an interaction with a police officer. If the officer says, no, you're detained, then you are not free to leave and you need to stay there. Now, if the officer starts asking you questions like, have you been drinking tonight? Where are you coming from? Where are you going? You don't have to answer any of those questions, and you should not answer any of those questions. One question you do have to answer, and this is a recent change in Arizona law, is the question about whether or not you have a concealed firearm in your vehicle. If the officer asks you that question, you have to answer that question honestly. Failure to answer at all or failure to answer truthfully can give rise to a criminal prosecution just for that reason. In a DUI case, the officer will often ask you to play field sobriety. Criminal defense attorneys will say games. Prosecutors will say field sobriety exercises on the side of the road. You've all seen these and you're all aware of them. They're things like stand on one foot, walk a straight line, touch your nose. You don't have to do any of those, and you should refuse all of those. But you should do it in a nice way. Just like refusing further questions, you shouldn't be a jerk about it. You should say, hey, look, I've got a friend, his name is Marc Victor, and he advised me to never answer any questions on the side of the road and never play any games or take any tests on the side of the road. And you should also add, by the way, I'd like to call him right now. Incidentally, I'm always available 24/7, 365, and you can reach me through my website, attorneyforfreedom.com, or by simply calling my law firm at 480-755-7110. 24 hours a day, we're available. But guess what I'm going to tell you if you call my law firm and you speak to me? I'm going to tell you not to answer any questions. And so that will always be the advice coming from my law firm. So you don't have to answer questions. You don't have to participate in those games on the side of the road. And that also includes the pen test. You don't have to do that one either. On the side of the road, sometimes an officer will ask you if you'll take a preliminary breath test. you have a right to refuse that one, and that won't be held against you. A lot of people confuse that test with the tests that are required later on. If you get arrested, after your arrest, an officer will ask for blood, breath, or urine. And if you refuse one of those tests, you're likely to be suspended for 1 year just for refusing the tests, and the officer will likely get a warrant and take your blood anyways. So normally it's our advice to submit to those tests after you've been arrested, but still you're better off calling and getting a thumbs up from the attorney at the time, because there are some times that I would recommend a person refuse even that one after arrest. So if you are charged with DUI, there's 3 different varieties of a DUI here in Arizona. There's the one we refer to as the A1, then there's an A2 and an A3, and I'm going to explain them briefly for you, and it's important to understand all of these because let me start with the A2. Most people understand the A2, which is that you're drinking alcohol and they know about the legal limit. The legal limit in Arizona is 0.08. And so if your blood comes back a 0.08 or higher within 2 hours of the time you're driving, they've got you on a DUI if they can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt up in court. So be careful of that one. But in addition to that one, there's one that people don't very well understand, and so I bet you don't know this one. You can be found guilty of a DUI even with a blood alcohol content under the legal limit of 0.08. How do they prove that? That's the A1 DUI. And on the A1 DUI, all they need to prove, all the state needs to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, is that your ability to operate a motor vehicle was impaired to the slightest degree by any drug. It could be alcohol, it could be prescription medication for which you have a prescription, it could be over-the-counter medication. Any drug that affects your ability to operate a motor vehicle to the slightest degree can give rise to a prosecution and even a conviction for DUI. Now, the A3 DUI is slightly different. The A3 DUI deals with either illegal drugs or prescription drugs for which you're using the drug in excess of the prescription. If they can prove that you have an illegal drug in your system and you're driving a motor vehicle, you lose on an A3 DUI. This is probably the most insidious of all the DUIs. So for all you people who illegally smoke marijuana, keep in mind, if the state pulls you over and they have enough to arrest you and they take your blood or urine and they find as a result of that test that you have any amount of THC or any of the metabolites of marijuana in your system, you lose on a DUI. So be very, very careful. It all gets back to the very important point I said at the beginning. Don't drink and drive. Don't drive with an illegal drug in your system. That's a good place to start. Avoid the DUI entirely. But there are things, as I pointed out, that you can do to avoid being pulled over. You should pay attention to those things. Always be courteous to a police officer. I never recommend that you sort of be a jerk at the scene. I think that will only anger a police officer. Keep in mind, there are some very good police officers out there, and you don't know who you're dealing with. You could be dealing with a good police officer or a bad police officer, and I think in either case, you should be conscious of that, who you're dealing with. Because remember, DUI, although it's a misdemeanor most of the time, is still a very serious crime. If you're convicted of a DUI, even as a first-time offender, you're going to jail. We have mandatory jail for a first-time DUI offense here in Arizona. Plus, you can expect heavy fines, probably in excess of $2,000. You can expect license problems, at least 90 days, where 30 days of that, no driving at all. You can expect counseling. You can expect going to a video prepared by the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. There are lots of consequences as a result of a DUI, even including points on your license, traffic survival school, and insurance rates are likely to go up. So DUI is a very, very serious, in fact, a case could be made, it's the most serious of all our misdemeanor crimes. Now, in addition to that, if you are found guilty of a DUI during a time that your license is suspended or restricted for any reason, even if it's suspended because you failed to pay traffic tickets, that's an instant pass to the felony world. You can be charged with a felony DUI. It's a class 4 felony, and it does carry prison as a possibility. There's a mandatory 4 months in prison if you get convicted of that one, and your license will be revoked for 3 years at least. So that's a very serious variety of DUI. It's the felony DUI. Other ways to get an express ticket to the felony court is if you commit your third DUI in 7 years, that's an automatic felony, or you commit a DUI while you've got a minor under 15 in the car. That's also a very serious offense, and it's a felony. So these are some tips for managing DUIs. And of course, there is no one-size-fits-all advice on a DUI. The best thing you can do is keep my card in your wallet, and that way, if you do have an interaction, an unscheduled interaction with a police officer, smart thing to do is to be courteous, do the things you have to do, which is pull over, license, registration, proof of insurance, get out of the vehicle. If they ask you the question about the firearm, you need to answer that one. And at that point, you're done. You should not answer any further questions. You should ask to call your attorney. And if you've got my card in your wallet, you can call me 24/7, 365. I will take your call. I will tell you not to take any of those games on the side of the road. I will tell you not to answer any questions. And this is going to apply whether or not you've been drinking. Because remember, DUI is one of those crimes where there's not a lot of physical evidence against you. Lots of the evidence that is brought against a defendant in a DUI case are sort of squishy things like the odor of alcohol, bloodshot, watery eyes, slurred speech, a slight sway. These are things that are difficult, really, to confirm whether or not they actually occurred, and an officer gets to just simply testify to these things in court. Also, how you did on those field sobriety games on the side of the road. I wouldn't want to trust my freedom to the judgments of any person on the side of the road taking one of those field sobriety tests, and you shouldn't either. So there's some tips for avoiding DUIs. Remember, my best piece of advice on this: don't drink and drive in the first place, and that's a good way to avoid DUIs. If you have further questions about DUI or any criminal defense, always feel free to contact me through my website, attorneyforfreedom.com, or you can just call into my law firm at 480-755-7110. Thanks for paying attention.